Hi guys. In this video, I'm very delighted to explain um, basically what is monogenic disorders of autoimmunity. These disorders are rare, but they brilliantly explain the mechanisms of autoimmunity to produce a cluster of autoimmune syndromes. So first of all, I'm going to be talking about the autoimmune regulation in the thymus, and the peripheral regulation via regulatory T cells, giving an example of pathology in each case. So first we begin with the autoimmune regulator, or AIRE gene. So a monogenic mutation in the AIRE gene leads to abnormal central tolerance of T lymphocytes in the thymus. Why is that? Here's a diagram of the thymus, shown in a sort of wedge shape. Your bone marrow produce your precursor lymphocytes, T lymphocytes, which then go to the thymus. And these basically they don't differentiate between self and non-self yet, which is why they go through the thymus, the schooling of the thymus. They begin in the cortex, where they gradually, move downwards. So here's from the blood vessel. They move downwards, where they are then presented with antigens, both self and non-self. Now, the AIRE is basically a gene, makes a transcription factor in the medulla of the thymus, and plays a very important role in displaying a variety of self-antigens to your maturing T lymphocytes, which are not shown in this diagram. So pretend you've got a T lymphocyte, it's moving down, and then AIRE is helping to present self-antigens to these lymphocytes. Those T lymphocytes that are self-reactive undergo apoptosis, or they may go into the periphery, but they develop anergy. So that's why AIRE plays a very important role in autoimmune regulation, hence the name. Now moving on to pathology. If you have this AIRE mutation, you can develop a cluster of autoimmune pathologies, usually pertaining to the endocrine system. You develop what's called autoimmune polyendocrinopathy syndrome type 1, APS type 1. Now thinking back to the actual cellular problem, you now have a lot of, you don't have adequate T lymphocyte schooling to recognize that are non-self-reactive. They then circulate, and then when there's a failure of peripheral tolerance, which is possible, you can develop T cell mediated responses against the parathyroid, leading to hypoparathyroidism, which clinically leads to hypocalcemia. And then also you can have T cell mediated destruction of the adrenals, leading to hypoadrenalism, such as Addison's syndrome, autoimmune hypoadrenalism, which could be, you could have low cortisol release, low, what's the other one? Low catecholamine release, etc., etc. And what's the third one? Glomerulosa is the cortex. Glomerulosa is your what's it called again? Aldosterone. I have aldosterone. And then your your fasciculata is your cortisol, and then your reticulata is your sex steroids. So you can develop a variety of problems related to autoimmune adrenal function, pertaining to your blood pressure regulation via the aldosterone, or it could be your cortisol, or your sex steroids. Lastly, you can also affect your epidermis and mucosal linings, because they are rife with T cells, with macrophages which and dendritic cells that activate T cells. So then the dendritic cells can take antigens to these self-reactive T cells, resulting in dysfunction. And one particular issue you get in APS1 is chronic mucocutaneous candidiasis, which is like a chronic candidal infection of the skin and the mucosal membranes. And this is linked to basically a lack of Th17 T helper cells. So coming back to the thymus, you need the schooling to produce a special kind of T lymphocyte called Th17, and Th17 produces interleukin 17, which plays a very important role in combating candidal infection. So as an aside, just a brief aside, in HIV, when you have loss of T helper cells, CD4, you have also reduced activation of interleukin 17 as well, which can lead to sort of candidal infections. Now moving on to the peripheral side, loss of peripheral tolerance. There's a condition called IPEX, which stands for immune polyendocrinopathy, enteropathy that is X-linked. This results from a FOXP3 mutation, which results in abnormal peripheral tolerance of your T lymphocytes, specifically T, not B, because your T regulatory cells are dysfunctional. Now here is the biochemistry. So FOXP3 is normally, I'm not going to explain the mechanics exactly, but FOXP3 is very important for Tregs to assert their function in suppressing T lymphocytes, which are helper T lymphocytes, and killer T lymphocytes, mainly the helper T lymphocytes. So it dampens down this. So Tregs play a very important role in peripheral tolerance because, as I explained in the very beginning, some self-reactive lymphocytes may escape the school. They may be truant, really skilled truant T lymphocytes, which then enter into the peripheral circulation. Now, either these get inactivated because of anergy, which is there's a lack of co-stimulatory signals, which means they do not have any function and then they die. The other mechanism is via T regulatory cells, which recognize that these are truant T lymphocytes, they shouldn't be there, so they suppress them. Now, for Treg to function properly, it needs FOXP3. So in IPEX, when you have a FOXP3 mutation, it can lead to a cluster of autoimmune pathologies. You can have an autoimmune enteropathy, which is IgA mediated. You can have a chronic psoriasis and eczema, which is a type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. You can have a nail dystrophy. And just like AIRE, you can also have an autoimmune endocrinopathies, affecting parathyroid, thyroid, and also pancreas too, leading to autoimmune diabetes mellitus. And also you can have an autoimmune bullous pemphigoid, which is IgG mediated. So if I can now bring this into a close and focus on the overall concepts, we're talking about autoimmunity. We're talking about monogenic disorders of autoimmunity. We're talking first centrally, where the thymic schooling of T lymphocytes is affected, leading to endocrine dysfunction and chronic mucocutaneous candidiasis. And then we are talking about loss of peripheral tolerance via Tregs, which lead to enteropathy, skin disorders, and endocrine disorders, which are all autoimmune and mediated via usually T helper lymphocytes. So I hope this video helped to clarify a few things about autoimmune disorders from a monogenic level. Thank you very much.